Welcome back to More Than a Milspouse, the podcast for military spouses who want to love their lives without losing themselves along the way. Today, we are diving into this very topic of loving your life without losing yourself. What in the world does that exactly mean, and how is it possible for you? You might think military life isn't compatible with having your own passions, goals, and dreams, but that's simply not true. And today, I want us to have a conversation about how you can love your life without losing yourself or your sanity along the way. Welcome to More Than a Milspouse, the podcast for military spouses who want to live with more meaning and less overwhelm. I'm your host, Christine, seasoned military spouse, mom of 3, life coach, and your guide to intentionally designing a life you're excited about as a military spouse. I'm here to help you get the clarity you need so you can get unstuck and unlock your purpose and potential. Because you, my friend, are more than a milspouse. You have something valuable to offer. And when you pursue the things that light your heart on fire, you trade frustration for fulfillment and isolation for a life of impact. It's time to discover who you are meant to be, because together we can change the world. Welcome back, friends. I hope you are having a good spring. We are in the fun time leading up to our PCS this summer and trying to figure out where we're going to live and all of the pieces. Our orders finally came through, so we're now can actually put some dates on the calendar, which kind of feels good. But I also know what's coming over the next few months, and it's a lot. This is our 3rd summer in a row to move. So the moving process itself at this point doesn't feel as daunting, but it's also the awareness that I know how many pieces have to line up and wanting to make sure that I'm thinking ahead while at the same time trying to be present where we are, live our lives. All of my kids just signed up for spring soccer, so that is also kicking off at the same time, which is going to take a lot of coordination on behalf of my husband and I to get everybody to the soccer fields, which is not my favorite thing to give up so many nights of the week, but I'm glad it is just for a season. Today, we are going to be talking about the tagline of this podcast, loving your life without losing yourself. I really wanted an episode to unpack this idea because here's what I know about military life. There's always something going on, and it is easy to feel stuck in this process of there's so many things outside of our control dictating how we direct our time and energy. And it can feel like we either get to this place where we're not loving our life, where we feel like we don't have any control over the process and we don't love the way that it looks, or we feel like we've got to put ourselves and our passions and our goals and our dreams on the back burner. And in the process, we lose a little bit of ourself. Or on the flip side, we try to do everything, have the career, be the involved parent, volunteer, hold down the home front, and end up completely exhausted and burnt out. And somewhere along the way, we have to start asking questions. Is it possible to love our lives even if our circumstances don't change? And is it possible to do this without burning out or losing ourselves in the process? And so today I want to talk about how I believe it is possible to build a life that you love in the midst of the military lifestyle. Now, before we get into this, I also want to acknowledge that, what is on everyone's minds right now? What's going on in the Middle East and the conflict with Iran, and how many of us feel this extra level of stress and uncertainty about what the coming months might look like. Moments like this definitely add another layer of stress and can contribute to this question: is it possible to love my life in the midst of the military lifestyle? And that's why I think having a conversation like this today matters, because it's really about learning to stay grounded and focus on what we can control so that we're creating a life that we love, even inside uncertainty and stress. This is a powerful skill that we can cultivate in the midst of this lifestyle. So I think it's really an important conversation for us to have in a moment. Now, before we talk about how we can build a life we love, let's acknowledge the reality of the life that we live. There's lots of uncertainty, especially in times like this. There are moves, there is starting over, there is being away from friends and families, there is being a default parent, managing the household, there is the mental load of trying to handle everything from school forms and doctor's appointments and childcare logistics and trying to restart your career. It was funny to me when we moved here last summer, and this is what, our 8th, 9th, I've lost count at this point, number of moves. And it feels sometimes like all I do is fill out paperwork for sports, for schools, for doctors, for dentists. It is like this never-ending list of paperwork that I am constantly filling out. And we moved last summer, and my husband didn't have to start because he's in school this year. And he was like, oh, I can take the kids to their dentist appointment. And I was like, great, I have some help. He can do this one thing, right? And he comes back from taking 3 kids to the dentist. And he's like, I deserve a medal for the amount of paperwork I filled out at the dentist office. And I had to laugh because, yes, it is a lot of paperwork at the dentist office. But if you count the number of dental offices that I have taken the kids to and filled out forms for, and at the doctors and everywhere else, it is hundreds of pages of filling out. And it just made me laugh when he was like, I deserve a medal for filling out all the paperwork at the dentist office. And I was like, way to go, sweetheart. You did a great job. But there is so much of the unspoken mental load and this responsibility that often falls on the spouse. Not because it was intentionally planned that way, but because the circumstances of military life sometimes require some parent to be present to keep the day-to-day life running. And many of us step into that role and take on that responsibility. But over time, that can start to feel heavy. And what happens is it's very easy for us to feel like we have to do this thing because we've just been like, I'm the only one that can do this in this moment. And the more that we try to do everything, there is only so much of us to go around. And it's easy, if we're trying to do it all, to slide into this place of burnout or have a growing sense of resentment, or the feeling that you're constantly trying to do it all but never really moving forward or getting ahead. And at some point, most of us will have a moment where we ask, is my life just about surviving military life, getting through the next deployment or the next PCS, or is it possible to build a life I enjoy inside this lifestyle? Which is exactly what happened to me and what led me on this whole path of what would that look like for me to enjoy the life I have. If my husband is enjoying this career and I want to support him in his goals and endeavors, how is it possible is it possible for me to thrive in this lifestyle? And so I started doing all of this reading and research. And what I really came to realize is that each of us needs a sense of purpose in life. But this word, this idea of purpose is really big, right? And it has so many different meanings. And to be honest, if we are in a survival mode, like the idea of thinking about pursuing my purpose feels very far away from where we are. Purpose kind of feels like a luxury thing when we're just trying to make it through the day or make it through the week, right? We're not thinking, am I living with purpose? We're thinking, well, how do I get the bills paid? Can we get groceries this month? How am I going to find someone who's willing to hire me when I have like 9 different types of jobs on my resume? Why am I struggling with resentment? We're thinking about these things of actual life rather than pursuing purpose. Purpose feels really far away. So the real question that we need to ask ourselves is, how do we actually move from feeling stuck inside the life we have to thriving inside the life we have? How do we love our lives now instead of just waiting and hoping that someday in the future we're going to have a life we love? Because if we want to have a life we love in the future, that starts today. And when I figured out that the things that I'm doing today are going to impact the life I have in the future, it shifted everything for me. And that's what I want us to dig into today. I shared a couple of weeks ago on the podcast that this podcast has existed for 5 years now, which is crazy to me. But I've had so many conversations with spouses over the years. And as I have done this work in my own life, and as I have talked with so many other spouses, I kept seeing these themes show up. The feeling stuck, the starting over, the losing confidence, the dealing with imposter syndrome, trying to figure out who you are outside of the military role, and wanting more, but not knowing how to move forward. Now, don't get me wrong. I definitely think that there are institutional and organizational changes that will help military families thrive. But that's not my main focus. My main focus is on how you and I can make choices in our real everyday life that helps move us towards the life we want. How can I help you feel empowered? How can I help myself move towards the life I love? And that curiosity of how do we do this is what led me to start the podcast and ultimately led me to pursue coaching certifications. And as I was pursuing my coaching certification, I approached it through the lens of how can I help military spouses, in particular, learn to thrive and love their lives without losing themselves? What are the pieces of the puzzle that need to be in place, that we need to have to be able to live a life of purpose and meaning in this military lifestyle? And through the conversations that I had and through all of my research and study, I came up with my own signature framework called the Pivot to Purpose framework that I use in my coaching practice. Now, when I say framework, that's not necessarily something complicated. It's simply a path that we move forward together. Now, does everyone need to walk through each step of this path? Not necessarily. We're all going to have different entry points. But these 5 elements of the Pivot framework are what help us live a life we love. It is helping us transform the life we have into a life of meaning and purpose. So pivot helps guide us down this path. And there are 5 stages on the path. The P stands for preparation. Everything starts with the foundation. Before we change anything about our lives, we have to prepare for that change. That means looking honestly at where we are today, what's working in our life, what's not working, and what we might need to let go of. Preparation is about building that foundation so that the next steps we take actually stick. Once we've laid that foundation, the I stands for identity. And this is one of the most powerful pieces because military life can blur that sense of identity. It's easy for us, if we have been on this journey for a while, to say, I used to be, or I wanted to do, or I don't even know what I want to do anymore. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, right? Because we've done all these different things. We've shifted how we show up depending on where we are. And the work of identity really is helping you reconnect with who you are at your core, what your core values are, what your strengths, your story, because who you are shapes every decision you make. And I want you to build a life around the things that matter most to you, not based around what's needed or necessary or what you've stepped into because that was what someone else wanted you to do. So we want to get that foundation of we're ready to make a change. We know who we are and what's important to us, our core identity. And then we move into V, which is vision. Once you connect with who you really are, then we can really start asking some powerful questions. What do I want my life to look and feel like? Not what anyone else thinks you should want or the life that others expect of you, but a life that genuinely excites you. And getting down to that nitty-gritty of what would that look like? Vision is where we bring possibility back into the picture because we're creating a vision of how to thrive in the life we have today and charting a path forward for thinking long-term about what I want my life to look and feel like and what I can do now that impacts that future result. It's not something that we need necessarily a lot of time to pursue. But when we have that focus, that long-term perspective of what we actually want, we can make decisions that are in alignment with that future. If we don't know what we want or who we are or where we're going, we're not going to move in that direction. But the more that we get clear on who we are and the kind of life we want to live, the more that we make choices and decisions that are in alignment with that and that feel good in the moment because we know we're making it based on how we were created, who we were designed to be, and how we can best live that out. So once we've laid that foundation, we've done the identity work, we've created a vision for our life, then we move into the O phase, which is the optimize phase. This is where things get really practical and we can break this down and say, okay, how do we start to implement this vision in real life? How do we take action without overwhelming ourselves? Optimization is about building habits, routines, systems, and strategies that actually work inside military life. It's not about having this perfect life. It's about saying, how do I practically break this down and live this out in my regular everyday life? So we start to optimize together. And then the T is for transformation because Over time, these small shifts that we begin to make compound, and that these small shifts create real transformation. Not overnight, but gradually. We can see how we begin to look at life differently, how we feel differently, and how we begin to feel more aligned in how we spend our time and energy. The choices that we make can help us begin to feel more confident, more energized, and more fully alive. We build a life that feels intentional instead of reactive. And the reason that I am so passionate about this process and about working in particular with military spouses is because you deserve more than just surviving this lifestyle. I want you to experience joy inside of it. I want you to grow, to feel like it's possible to pursue your goals, to evolve as a person, and to not feel like you have to choose between supporting your family and honoring yourself. You can love this lifestyle and build a life that reflects who you are. It may not look like society's definition of success, but it can feel really good to you. So when I say loving your life without losing yourself, I say it because I think it is absolutely possible for you to build a life that lights you up, that feels aligned, that feels energized, that makes you feel alive, and doesn't require you to choose between burnout or losing yourself along the way. So if you're listening today and you're like, yes, I am not loving my life right now, and I really want to figure out how to love my life inside this military lifestyle. If you feel like you've put yourself on the back burner, if you feel like you are reaching a place of burnout, if something is not working in your life, I want you to know, number one, you're not alone. And number two, maybe you just need a little bit of support to help you get moving in the right direction again. That's why I created the Pivot to Purpose framework. If you are curious about what the Pivot to Purpose framework could do for you, or want to learn more about the coaching process, then I would love to have a conversation with you. You can find out in the show notes how we can work together, or just send me a message on Instagram. And if you're not ready to take that coaching step, I want to leave you with a very practical way that you can get started loving your life today. Pull out a blank sheet of paper or open the notes section on your phone and just type out an answer to the question, what brings me joy? What are things I love to do, see, feel, experience, have? And just brainstorm, dump all of the ideas onto the page, and start to notice themes that you see. Do you love going to coffee shops? Do you love getting to dance? Do you love getting to talk with others about books or movies? Or do you love hiking? Start to notice what you do that brings you joy, and then ask yourself, how can I add a little more of this in my everyday life? I'd love to know if you take on this challenge and what you learn about yourself in the process. Come join us inside the free More Than a Milspouse Facebook community and share what you are learning about yourself. And if this episode or this podcast is helpful to you, share it with someone you know so that we can help more military spouses get unstuck and love their lives without losing themselves. As always, remember, you are more than a milspouse. Until next time, may you live filled, fueled, and full of joy. Hey, amazing milspouse, before you go, I want you to know that I love hearing from you. The More Than a Milspouse community exists to help you thrive as a military spouse. Figure out what lights your heart on fire and empower you to live with purpose and impact. You can have an incredible impact simply by heading over to iTunes to subscribe and leave a review. But your impact doesn't stop there. You can empower those around you simply by sharing an episode with a friend or neighbor, someone who needs a little encouragement in this military life. And if this episode was meaningful to you, spread the love by taking a screenshot of this episode and tagging me on Instagram so we can continue to reach more people, change more lives, and shift the way that military spouses look at life. Because we are better together, and together we can change the world. Let's do it.